There are moments when you realize that even the people who love you the most cannot step into what you are carrying. They may sit beside you, ask how you are, wait for words, but what lives inside you does not know how to become a sentence. And so you nod, you smile faintly, you say something acceptable. Not because you are hiding, but because what hurts has no clear edges yet. Maybe this is one of those moments. Maybe today you feel surrounded and still alone. Not the loud kind of loneliness, but the quiet one that settles when explanations feel heavy and repeating your story feels like reopening a wound that never really closed. It's the loneliness of realizing that understanding has limits, that even care, even love, sometimes stops at the surface. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling this. When pain becomes intimate, it often becomes solitary. Not because you chose distance, but because something inside you needs a different kind of space. A space without advice, without timelines, without the subtle expectation that you should already be better by now. Perhaps you've noticed how voices fade when the ache deepens. Not in cruelty, not in abandonment, but in recognition that this part cannot be walked for you, that some passages of life are narrow, meant for one set of footsteps at a time. This realization can be frightening. It can feel like standing at the edge of something unnamed, holding questions no one else can carry. Questions about who you are now, about what was lost, about what remains when the noise settles and the world continues as if nothing sacred just fractured inside you. If today feels heavier than it should, it may be because you are standing at that edge, not an edge of failure, not an edge of weakness, but an edge of truth, where the familiar ways of being comforted no longer fit, and the old language no longer reaches deep enough. In Japanese thought, there is a quiet respect for the path that must be walked alone, not as punishment, not as proof of strength, but as an acknowledgement that some understandings do not arrive through instruction or companionship. They arrive through presence, through staying, through allowing yourself to be exactly where you are, even when no one else can fully join you there. This kind of solitude does not ask you to be brave. It does not ask you to be hopeful. It only asks you to be honest with the weight you are already holding. And if right now it feels like no one can go with you, if even the closest hands cannot quite reach, let that be named gently, without judgment. Let it exist as it is. Some paths begin this way, quietly, without witnesses, without reassurance. Not because you are alone in the world, but because this step, just this one, belongs only to you. There are days when continuing feels heavier than stopping ever did, not because you want to disappear, but because each small movement asks for a strength you no longer recognize as yours. Getting through the hours becomes a quiet labor. Breathing feels deliberate. Existing feels negotiated, moment by moment. Maybe you know this weight. It doesn't announce itself dramatically. It arrives quietly, disguised as routine. You still wake up. You still answer messages when you can. You still move through the shape of your life. But underneath, something is dragging. Something unnamed. Something tired in a way sleep does not touch. This kind of exhaustion is rarely visible. Others may not notice it at all. They may see you standing, functioning, speaking, and assume the storm has passed. But inside, it feels like carrying a history that never gets lighter, no matter how far you walk. Sometimes the hardest part is not the pain itself, but the expectation that you should be able to move past it by now, as if time were a transaction, as if endurance were proof of healing, as if continuing meant you were no longer allowed to feel how much it costs. But there is a quiet truth, often left unspoken. Continuing can hurt. There are moments when going on is not an act of hope, but an act of inertia. You move because stopping would require an explanation you do not have. You move because others depend on your motion. You move because the world does not pause, even when something inside you has. This does not make you weak. In the tradition inspired by Musashi, there is no romance in endurance, no praise for unnecessary struggle, only the understanding that some roads are walked not because they are chosen, but because they are there. And on such roads, the weight is not a sign of failure. It is evidence of how much has already been carried. Perhaps today you are not searching for meaning. Perhaps you are simply surviving the distance between one moment and the next. And if that is true, it deserves respect. Not correction, not motivation, respect. Because there is a difference between being alive and feeling alive. And in the space between those two, many people walk quietly, unseen, doing the best they can with what remains. If your steps feel slow, let them be slow. If your strength feels borrowed, let it be borrowed. There is no debt to joy, no obligation to arrive whole when you are still holding fragments. Continuing does not always mean moving forward. Sometimes it simply means not collapsing under the weight of everything that has already happened. And if that is all you can do right now, it is enough to be here, carrying what you carry, without having to justify the cost of it. There is a kind of solitude that feels different from being left behind. It does not arrive with slammed doors or unanswered calls. It arrives quietly, even gently, as the realization that no one has disappeared, yet no one can fully step into where you are standing now. This can be confusing. You may look around and see that people are still there. They care. They ask. They would help if they knew how. And yet, something inside you remains untouched by their presence, as if your inner world has shifted into a language only you can hear. This is not abandonment. It feels closer to standing in a room that only you can enter, holding experiences that refuse to be shared without being diminished. Not because others would judge you, but because words would flatten what you feel into something smaller than it truly is. Perhaps you have tried to explain it before. Perhaps you stopped mid-sentence, sensing that what you were about to say would not survive being spoken, and so you stayed quiet. Not to protect others, but to protect the truth of your own experience. There is grief in this, and relief too. Grief, because being understood matters deeply to the human heart, and relief, because some truths do not need to be translated to be real. They only need to be held. In moments like this, solitude is not a rejection by the world. It is an invitation inward, not one you asked for, not one you feel ready for, but one that appears when the outer forms of connection can no longer reach the core of what is happening inside you. In the spirit that echoes through Musashi's path, solitude is not the absence of love. It is the narrowing of the road, a recognition that certain crossings are too precise, too personal, to allow more than one set of footsteps. This does not mean you must close yourself off. It does not mean you have become unreachable. It simply means that something in you is changing shape, and the old ways of being accompanied no longer fit. You may feel a quiet fear here, a worry that if no one can follow you into this space, you might never return, that you might become distant, unknown, separate from the life you once shared so easily. But solitude does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to remain present with yourself, without performance, without explanation. There is a difference between being alone and being unsupported, and sometimes the deepest support comes not from being pulled out of your inner world, but from being allowed to stand there without being rushed. If this moment feels lonely, let it feel lonely. If it feels spacious, let it be spacious. Do not force meaning onto it yet. This solitude is not a verdict. It is a passage, and passages, by their nature, are not places you stay forever, but they are places you must fully enter before you can leave. There is a particular ache that appears when life resumes its pace around you. Days continue to open and close. Conversations find their rhythm again. Plans are made, deadlines met, laughter returns to familiar places. From the outside, everything seems intact. From the inside, something has stayed behind. You may feel it when you hear others talk about the future with ease, when they speak of next steps, of what comes after, of how things will be again. Their words are not cruel. They are simply moving at a speed you cannot match. And in that difference, a quiet distance forms. It can feel as though time itself has betrayed you, not because it passed too quickly, but because it did not wait. Something inside you needed stillness, needed a pause long enough to understand what was lost, what changed, what will never return to its former shape. But the world does not ask if you are ready. It keeps going, gently, but relentlessly. You may wonder if something is wrong with you for not keeping up, why it seems easier for others to return to normal, why your own sense of normal feels fractured, unreliable, or gone altogether, why moments that once felt ordinary now carry a weight you did not choose. This is not delay, it is dissonance. There are experiences that shift the inner landscape so deeply that the outer world no longer aligns the way it once did. What used to feel synchronized now feels out of step, and in that misalignment, you remain, watching, listening, trying to stand in a rhythm that no longer belongs to you. This can be lonely in a way that is hard to explain, because no one has abandoned you, no one has pushed you aside, and yet, you feel suspended, as if you are standing in a moment that everyone else has already left, not because you refuse to move, but because something asked you to stay longer than expected. In paths reminiscent of Musashi's quiet understanding, there is no urgency to rejoin the crowd, no insistence that you must return to the pace of others to be valid. There is only the acknowledgement that each journey unfolds in its own timing, regardless of the movement around it. Remaining is not failing to progress. Sometimes remaining is the only honest response to what you have lived. Sometimes it is the body and the spirit saying that rushing forward would mean leaving something essential behind. If today it feels like the world has already turned the page while you are still reading the last lines, let that be true without shame. There is no prize for arriving where you are not yet ready to stand. The world will keep moving. It always does. And for now, you remain, not lost, not broken, but listening to something that cannot be hurried, even as everything else continues without you. There is a moment when the idea of being seen loses its importance, not because you no longer care, but because what you are facing cannot be shaped for an audience. It asks for honesty, not applause, silence, not validation. Some paths are like this. They do not announce themselves. They do not offer witnesses. They unfold quietly, almost indifferently, as if to test whether you will keep walking when no one is watching, when no one is measuring your progress, when no one is there to confirm that you are doing it right. It is in this space that the memory of Musashi appears, not as a legend, not as a master to be followed, but as a human figure who understood something difficult to accept, that certain ways of becoming oneself happen outside of recognition. He did not walk to be admired. He walked because walking was unavoidable. There is a deep discomfort in this idea. The absence of an audience can feel like erasure, as if what you are enduring only matters if someone else can witness it, understand it, or name it. But there are transformations that lose their truth the moment they are performed. Perhaps this is why your journey feels so quiet right now. Not empty, but stripped, reduced to essentials, reduced to breath, thought, memory, and the steady presence of your own steps, reduced to the simple fact of continuing, without explanation. This kind of walking can feel lonely in a way that is hard to articulate, not because you want attention, but because the human heart naturally seeks to be mirrored. And here, there is no mirror, only movement, only the sound of your own inner world unfolding without commentary. In this solitude, comparisons fade, not because you resolve them, but because they no longer apply. There is no one to measure yourself against, no one to impress, no one to disappoint. Only the quiet awareness of who you are when stripped of context. This can be unsettling. Without an audience, questions become sharper. Doubts have nowhere to hide. You begin to sense parts of yourself you never had time to hear before. Not all of them are gentle. Some carry regret. Some carry grief. Some carry truths you avoided when the world was louder. But this is not punishment. It is refinement. Musashi's path was never about isolation for its own sake. It was about clarity, about removing what distracted from what was essential. And clarity, when it arrives, is rarely comfortable. If you feel unseen right now, it may not be because you have been forgotten. It may be because you are in a passage where seeing yourself matters more than being seen by others. Walking without an audience does not mean your journey lacks meaning. It means its meaning is still forming, quietly, honestly, beyond the reach of noise. And so you walk, not to prove anything, not to arrive quickly, but because this road, at this moment, does not allow for spectators. There is a fear that often rises when you realize you must walk alone for a while. A quiet fear that solitude will turn you into someone colder, sharper, less capable of feeling, as if the absence of constant touch, reassurance, or shared understanding might slowly erode your softness. This fear makes sense. The world often teaches that survival requires armor, that distance must be met with toughness, that walking alone means learning how not to need, how not to feel too much, how not to break again. And so you may find yourself wondering whether this passage will change you in ways you do not want. But solitude does not automatically harden what it touches. Sometimes it does the opposite. When no one is asking you to explain yourself, something inside you begins to soften. Not toward the world yet, but toward yourself. Without an audience, you no longer have to translate your pain into something acceptable. You no longer have to minimize it, package it, or prove its legitimacy. It can exist in its full weight, unedited, Walking alone does not require you to be strong in the way strength is usually praised. It does not require stoicism. It does not require discipline over emotion. It allows tenderness to appear without being immediately managed or corrected. You may notice how easily tears come now, or how memories surface without warning, or how small things carry unexpected gravity. This is not weakness. It is sensitivity returning to its natural state, no longer dulled by constant noise. In the spirit that echoes through Musashi's way of moving through the world, hardness was never the goal. Precision was, awareness was, and awareness, when it deepens, often brings vulnerability with it. To walk alone is to feel more clearly where something hurts, where something still longs, where something has not healed simply because time passed. This clarity can feel overwhelming at first, as if the protective layers you once relied on have thinned. But thinning is not breaking. There is a quiet resilience that grows when you allow yourself to remain open in isolation. Not open to harm, but open to truth, open to grief that never had space before, open to questions that were postponed, open to the reality of who you are beneath roles, expectations, and borrowed identities. You do not have to become distant to endure this. You do not have to shut down parts of yourself to keep moving. Sensitivity does not slow the path, it defines it. If you feel raw right now, let that rawness exist. It is not proof that solitude is damaging you. It may be proof that you are no longer numbing what deserves to be felt. Walking alone does not demand that you harden. It only asks that you stay present with what is real, even when that reality is fragile, unfinished, and quietly unfolding inside you. There comes a point when silence stops being empty and starts becoming revealing, when there are no voices left to distract you, no schedules demanding your attention, no one asking how you are or what comes next. In that quiet, something steps forward. It is you, not the version shaped by expectation, not the one adjusted for survival or approval, but the one that remains when there is nothing left to respond to. This encounter is rarely gentle at first. It does not announce itself with clarity. It arrives as unease, as restlessness, as the sense that something unresolved has been waiting patiently. This is the confrontation few people speak about, not a battle with the world, but with what has been carried silently for too long, regrets that were postponed, grief that never found language, anger that learned how to stay quiet, questions that were buried under obligation and momentum. When you walk alone long enough, these things surface, not because you invited them, but because there is finally space for them to breathe. Without the noise of daily performance, your inner world stops whispering and begins to speak more clearly. And what it says is not always easy to hear. You may feel discomfort without a clear cause, a heaviness that moves through your chest or your thoughts, a sudden awareness of choices you made or did not make that still echo inside you. This is not punishment, it is exposure. In paths inspired by Musashi's understanding, the true opponent was never external. It was distraction. It was illusion. It was the self you cling to in order not to face what is real. When those layers fall away, what remains is not an enemy, but it can feel like one. Facing yourself without escape can be unsettling. There is no one to blame, no one to impress, no one to negotiate with, only the truth of what you feel and what you have lived. This truth does not accuse. It does not demand resolution. It simply exists, waiting to be acknowledged without distortion. You may notice a desire to turn away, to fill the silence, to reach for anything that dulls the edge of this meeting. That impulse is human, because staying with yourself in this way requires a kind of honesty that leaves no room for excuses. But something important happens here. When you allow yourself to remain present in this confrontation, without fixing, without explaining, without running, what once felt threatening begins to soften, not because it disappears, but because it is finally seen. This encounter does not conclude anything. It does not deliver answers. It does not resolve the story. It simply marks a moment where you stand face to face with yourself, unguarded, unaccompanied, and undeniably alive in your own inner terrain. After the confrontation fades into silence, there is a space that feels strangely unfinished, not dramatic, not loud, just open. Questions linger there without urgency, without shape, without a demand to be solved, and in that openness, you remain. This is often the hardest part. Because the mind is trained to seek conclusions, to look for meaning, direction, or at least a reason that can be held like a map. But here, nothing resolves itself so easily. The questions stay, the uncertainty breathes, and there is no clear sign telling you what comes next. You may feel suspended between who you were and who you are becoming, unable to claim either fully. The old definitions no longer fit, yet the new ones have not formed. There is a quiet instability in this, a sense of standing on ground that has not hardened yet. Remaining here can feel unbearable at times, not because something terrible is happening, but because nothing is happening fast enough. There is no revelation arriving, no clarity descending, just the steady presence of not knowing, stretching longer than expected. In the spirit that echoes through Musashi's way of moving through life, this state is not something to escape, not because it is comfortable, but because it is honest. He understood that clarity is often born out of patience with confusion, not force against it. Remaining without answers does not mean giving up on meaning. It means allowing meaning to take its time. It means accepting that some truths ripen slowly, and any attempt to harvest them early only produces something shallow and incomplete. You may notice a subtle urge to fabricate certainty, to tell yourself a story that explains everything neatly. This urge is natural. It is how the mind protects itself from the discomfort of openness, but false closure carries its own cost. It asks you to move on before something inside you is ready. So you stay. You wake up not knowing what this experience will become. You move through days that feel provisional, as if they are placeholders for a life that has not resumed its shape yet. And still, you are here, breathing. Not resolved, but present. This kind of presence is rarely acknowledged. It does not look like progress. It does not sound like wisdom. It cannot be summarized or shared easily. And yet, it requires a quiet endurance that few recognize. Remaining without answers is not stagnation. It is exposure. Exposure to uncertainty, to vulnerability, to the truth that control was never as solid as it once seemed. If it feels uncomfortable to be here, that discomfort is part of the passage. It does not signal that you are lost. It signals that you are between certainties, where growth is subtle and almost invisible. Nothing is being demanded of you in this space. No decision, no transformation, no declaration of who you are now. Only this, to remain as you are, unfinished, unanswered, and still deeply human in the middle of what has not yet revealed its meaning. There is a thought that appears quietly in moments like this, almost without permission. A thought that says you should already be somewhere else by now, that something has taken too long, that while you remained, the world advanced, and you somehow missed the moment when things were supposed to fall back into place. This thought can be heavy. It carries comparisons you did not consciously choose, images of other lives unfolding more smoothly, timelines that seem cleaner, more decisive, more complete, and beside them, your own path feels delayed, interrupted, or out of sync. You may wonder where you would be if things had gone differently, if you had healed faster, if you had understood sooner, if you had not needed this long pause, this quiet detour that no one else seems to see. But lateness is a concept that only exists when all journeys are measured by the same clock, and they are not. Some paths move quickly on the surface and slowly underneath. Others appear stalled while something essential reshapes itself out of sight. What looks like delay from the outside is often deep recalibration within. In ways that echo Musashi's understanding of movement and timing, there is no universal pace that defines worth. Precision matters more than speed. Alignment matters more than arrival. A step taken before its time is not progress. It is dislocation. You have not failed because you needed longer. You have not fallen behind because you remained where others moved on. The depth of an experience is not measured by how quickly you exit it, but by how honestly you pass through it. Still, the feeling persists. A subtle shame for not having a clearer story to tell, for not being able to summarize what this period has given you, for still feeling tender where others seem resolved. But tenderness does not indicate immaturity. It indicates contact. It means you did not numb yourself just to keep pace. It means you allowed something real to touch you, even if it slowed you down. There is a quiet dignity in that. If you feel behind, it may be because you are moving on a different axis altogether, one that does not reward speed or visible milestones, one that values internal truth over external timing. The world rarely validates this kind of movement. It prefers visible outcomes, clear progress, before and after narratives. But some changes resist being packaged. They unfold slowly, invisibly, until one day you realize that the way you stand, the way you listen, the way you inhabit yourself has shifted. Not dramatically, but deeply. You are not late. You are where this path places you, at this exact moment, carrying what only you could have learned by moving at this pace. And whatever comes next will arrive in its own time, shaped not by urgency, but by the quiet accuracy of having stayed with what needed you to stay. There is a quiet moment when you realize that the path has not ended, even though it narrowed, that you are still moving, even if no one else is walking beside you, that something in you remains awake, attentive, alive, despite the weight, despite the uncertainty, despite the silence. This realization does not arrive with relief. It arrives softly. You notice it in the simple fact that you are still here, still listening, still breathing through days that once felt unbearable, still carrying memories, questions, and feelings that have not resolved, yet have not erased you either. When no one can go with you, the absence can feel absolute at first, as if being alone on this stretch means being cut off from the world entirely. But over time, another truth begins to surface, not loudly, not all at once, but steadily. You were never abandoned on this path. There is a difference between walking alone and being unseen, and even in solitude, there is a presence that remains, your own. The awareness that you are witnessing your life from the inside, without distraction, without performance, without the need to explain yourself to anyone else. In this space, inspired by the quiet discipline of Musashi's way, strength is not defined by conquest or resolution. It is defined by presence, by staying with yourself when there is no applause, by continuing without certainty, by allowing the path to be exactly as it is, without forcing meaning onto it too soon. You may still feel tired. You may still feel unsure. You may still wish that someone could fully understand what this has been like for you. All of that can remain true. And still, something else is true as well. You have not disappeared. You have not been erased by what you walked through. You are here, shaped by this solitude, not diminished by it. Perhaps this path does not promise clarity yet. Perhaps it does not offer answers, only continuity. But continuity itself is not nothing. It is proof that even when the road must be walked alone, it does not end in emptiness. If you are listening to this now, it means you are still open, still willing to sit with complexity, still allowing space for what cannot be rushed. And maybe that is enough for this moment. If this voice feels like company, if these words resonate with something you are carrying, consider staying, consider returning, consider subscribing, so you don't have to find this space again from the beginning when you need it. You are welcome here, exactly as you are. And whenever you need a quiet place to walk for a while, this path will still be here, waiting without demand, without urgency, without judgment.